To truly excel, athletes seek optimal conditions for peak performance, and for a talent like Carlos Alcaraz, such an environment seemed destined to persist indefinitely. However, his recent struggles have offered a glimmer of hope to rivals, suggesting the seemingly insurmountable reign might not be absolute. While other young talents are undoubtedly poised to challenge, Alcaraz's initial ascent was meteoric, winning Roland Garros at just 21. Followed by multiple Wimbledon titles, his on-court artistry captivated audiences, momentarily allowing fans to transcend their daily worries. Yet an imperceptible, far more insidious change began to surface, unrelated to his formidable footwork or powerful forehand. His razor-sharp focus started to waver. As of April 2026, heading into the pivotal clay season, whispers within the ATP circuit have erupted into overt discussions, filling locker rooms and prompting coaches to pull players aside for private talks. It was Novak Djokovic, a figure known for his measured words, who broke the unspoken code, explicitly articulating the silent force eroding Alcaraz's mental fortitude. Djokovic exposed what veteran coaches privately brand as a career killer: Alcaraz's escalating social media obsession. Documented evidence confirms a clear timeline, and the consequences are already evident on scoreboards. This platform is not a forum for negativity, but rather an arena for insightful analysis from tennis's most accomplished champion, addressing an issue too uncomfortable for mainstream sports media to confront. If you value unfiltered perspectives, subscribe now, because the precise moment Alcaraz's social media engagement began to disrupt his focus is traceable, and the underlying reasons are something no one in tennis dares to discuss publicly. The timeline itself is genuinely unsettling. In 2023, Alcaraz, freshly turned 20, boasted around 4 million Instagram followers and one Grand Slam title. His decision-making under pressure was nothing short of extraordinary. Coaches across the tour privately remarked on a mental clarity rare for his age, a composure that usually takes a decade to cultivate. Then came the endorsements aflood, not a trickle from brands like Louis Vuitton and Nike, plastering his image on billboards across 3 continents. His follower count didn't just grow, it exploded, surpassing 12 million on Instagram alone within 18 months. The demands for branded content multiplied, requiring shooting days to intrude on training weeks and travel itineraries to accommodate campaigns instead of crucial tournament preparation. Publicly, silence prevailed, fueled by the extraordinary financial gains and Alcaraz's continued winning streak, which lasted for a time. But observe the shift from mid-2024 onward. At the 2024 US Open, where he was the overwhelming favorite, Alcaraz surprisingly fell to Jack Draper in the quarterfinals, a player he had previously dominated. The match spiraled out of reach in the 3rd and 4th sets, his rally decisions in critical moments appearing disjointed. His between-point routine, once a model of serene focus, now betrayed visible hesitation, leaving his coach in the player's box with the look of someone waiting for a player who hadn't quite arrived. Alcaraz attributed the loss to fatigue, a narrative the media readily accepted, and the tennis world moved on. Djokovic, however, did not. This critical juncture demands an understanding of Novak Djokovic beyond his trophy collection. He is an unparalleled student of the mental game, distinguishing him from every other champion of the past 3 decades. Having collaborated with leading performance psychologists and discussed the neuroscience of attention in interviews, Djokovic grasps how the brain's prefrontal cortex, the region governing sustained concentration under duress, is progressively compromised by constant context switching. Every notification, every comment, every fleeting scroll between hitting sessions diverts precious cognitive resources from the deep focus essential for deciding sets. Djokovic meticulously constructed his career by safeguarding this mental reservoir, describing his pre-match regimen as a deliberate ritual of sensory deprivation, minimizing external stimuli to near zero in the hours before competition. His phone habits during tournament weeks have been documented by his team as bordering on extreme, not due to antisocial tendencies, but from a profound physiological understanding of how social media impacts sustained attention. Consequently, as he observed Alcaraz through 2024 and into 2025, monitoring his posting frequency, story updates from tournament sites, and mid-tournament brand content drops, Djokovic wasn't merely a critic. He was an observer who intimately recognized what was being forfeited and could precisely quantify its cost in competitive margins. The pivotal interview where Djokovic directly addressed this came during the lead-up to the 2025 Australian Open. Queried about the new generation and the challenge of maintaining elite standards in a media-saturated era, his response began generally before sharpening significantly. He drew a clear distinction between players who strategically compartmentalize their public profiles, managed by a team, confined to specific windows, structurally separated from competitive headspace, and those who inadvertently carry it onto the court as pervasive background noise. While Alcaraz wasn't explicitly named, every journalist in the room understood precisely who personified the latter category at that moment. The clip briefly circulated through tennis media for about 48 hours before being eclipsed by Australian Open match coverage. Most outlets framed it as a broad commentary on modern tennis, but a few astute analysts recognized the timing and specificity of Djokovic's remarks pointed to a particular individual. The reason behind his choosing that exact moment is worth independent examination. Djokovic, then 37, was facing a 2025 Australian Open campaign some in the press were labeling a potential farewell tour. Politically, he had nothing to gain by interjecting himself into a discussion about Alcaraz's habits. Rivals in decline typically don't offer observations that could be misconstrued as mentorship, instead prioritizing their own relevance. Djokovic, however, did the opposite, indicating his observation stemmed from something far beyond self-interest. It originated from someone who had witnessed the detrimental impact of social media obsession on a champion's potential, and deemed it essential to voice publicly, irrespective of personal optics. Performance data from Alcaraz's 2024 and early 2025 campaigns starkly corroborates these concerns. His first serve percentage in fifth sets notably decreased compared to his 2022 and 2023 figures. Conversely, his unforced error count in fourth set tiebreaks, historically his strongest statistical category, climbed. Moreover, his between-point time, tracked across multiple tournaments, lengthened in a manner performance analysts link to mental load rather than mere physical fatigue. A player burdened by cognitive noise inevitably takes slightly longer to reset between points, and these minute fractions accumulate significantly over 5 sets in a Grand Slam quarterfinal. None of this suggests Alcaraz is a diminished player. Such a framing would be preposterous. He remains capable of breathtaking tennis that silences crowds. His 2025 Roland Garros run, for instance, showcased stretches of aggressive baseline dominance genuinely without contemporary equal. However, that transcendent version of him, the one from 2023 where nothing seemed to breach his competitive bubble, has become increasingly elusive. The unspoken question circulating within the tennis world is, what fundamental change occurred between that version and the current one? Djokovic's answer posits that the foundational focus infrastructure was compromised, not dramatically, not instantaneously, but incrementally, mirroring the insidious nature of attention erosion. The social media obsession didn't supplant training hours. It insidiously colonized the crucial recovery periods, the mental white space between sessions that elite athletes utilized to solidify their competitive identity. This vital time was instead filled with engagement metrics, content performance data, and the specific psychological burden of sustaining a public persona at a massive scale. Supporting research exists entirely outside of tennis. Studies on cognitive bandwidth consistently demonstrate that highly visible public figures who actively manage their own social media presence, rather than delegating it, shoulder a measurable secondary cognitive load that significantly impacts performance in tasks demanding sustained concentration. While this effect might be subtle in low-stakes environments, it compounds exponentially under pressure. A player performing at 97% mental capacity loses a Grand Slam final differently than the identical player operating at 94%, even if the scoreline appears identical. The internal experience during those critical moments is profoundly distinct. Alcaraz has openly expressed his enjoyment of connecting with fans online and press conferences, describing it as energizing rather than draining, and he is not mistaken that for many, social engagement genuinely serves as a restorative. However, Djokovic's identification targets something more specific than Alcaraz's personal enjoyment. The core issue isn't pleasure, it's the neurological cost incurred at the precise moment of maximal competitive demand. The 4-4 tiebreak in the fifth set of a Grand Slam semifinal, when every prior hour of mental expenditure either manifests or doesn't. The Madrid Open this week brings all these observations into sharp, immediate focus. Clay is Alcaraz's preferred surface, and this is his home tournament. The crowd will be unequivocally behind him. On paper, nothing about this environment should generate the kind of pressure that exposes mental load issues. Yet the 2025 and 2026 clay seasons have already revealed that his margins on this surface are narrower than they once were. Players who logically had no business pushing him to 5 sets have done precisely that. The patterns Djokovic described do not vanish on favorable surfaces, they are intrinsic to the player himself. What renders Djokovic's observation particularly unsettling for Alcaraz's team is its undeniable source. This isn't a retired commentator simply reciting statistics from a studio. It is the most psychologically sophisticated competitor in the sport's history. A man who personally navigated the transition from rising star to global icon without ever allowing external noise to compromise his pristine mental state, delivering a specific, carefully considered diagnosis. To dismiss it would require arguing that Djokovic fundamentally misunderstands the mental demands of elite tennis, an argument no one in the sport would seriously entertain. The honest conversation, the one agents and sponsors prefer to avoid publicly, centers on whether Alcaraz at 22 is structurally equipped to definitively separate his commercial identity from his competitive one. Djokovic himself did not achieve this separation effortlessly. He has described in previous interviews how it demanded deliberate, almost architectural decisions about where his attention was permitted to focus during tournament windows. It was a skill he meticulously cultivated, not an innate trait. The underlying implication of Djokovic's candid exposure is that Alcaraz has not yet developed this crucial skill. His raw talent, the racket speed, court coverage, shot variety has never been in question. What Djokovic is pinpointing is the internal infrastructure, the management of attention, the profound ability to completely disengage from external noise when that noise must disappear. At 22, with the entire commercial world vying for his attention from every direction, possessing a social media footprint that generates its own gravitational pull, and wrestling with an undeniable obsession, and that term is accurate, with maintaining a public persona that becomes more demanding with every success, Alcaraz is navigating a landscape no previous generation of tennis champion has encountered at this scale or age. Djokovic did not declare Alcaraz finished, nor did he suggest his talent has vanished. What he exposed, and the word expose carries significant weight here because no one else of his stature was prepared to say it, is that something is actively and quietly eroding his competitive margins. Consistently, in the subtle spaces between the brilliant moments that still powerfully remind us of his capabilities when everything perfectly aligns. Whether Alcaraz chooses to address this is entirely his decision. The information is now public, its source unimpeachable, and the Madrid Open this week will undoubtedly furnish yet another data point to a pattern Djokovic identified long before most of the tennis world was willing to acknowledge it directly. This capacity to see the game and the individuals playing it, with a clarity that cuts through all comfortable narratives and lands squarely on the unvarnished truth, is what truly distinguishes a 24 Slam champion from everyone else in the discussion, far beyond just the titles. If you seek this kind of profound analysis every week, the perspectives mainstream tennis coverage avoids, the hidden patterns behind the scorelines, and the crucial conversations happening within the sport that rarely surface, subscribe to this channel right now and enable notifications. Every upload delves deeper than the headline, as you've witnessed today, and there is significantly more compelling content where this originated.